Go ahead. Bruce, you can start off anytime you like.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order of the AD Gray Subcommittee. And we have 4 out of the 5 members present and Max, the town planner. The first item on the agenda was to discuss the meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting, February 4th?
Motion made.
Second.
Any comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. Max, what's the next item on the agenda there? I don't have it on my, when I opened this up, I lost the,
Citizens' comments would be next.
right. Are there any citizens on the phone that have any comments or questions or in the town office?
Today in the town office, we have Carl Gushy. So Carl, if you just want to ask your question to the, if you have any questions for the subcommittee.
I don't particularly have a question at all. I just kind of got involved with this a few weeks ago. I've been a citizen of Warren my entire life. I grew up in Warren, and I live over here on 32 now. And I'm just starting to learn this process of what's going on with the AD Gray School. I was one of the seniors that left AD Gray back in 1969 and moved over to Madomet. And I was one of the last high school people in the school. So I have a little connection to the high school. And I'm just trying to understand more about what we're doing. So I don't really particularly have a question, but I'm trying to learn more about what's going on and what we're doing. And the only thing that I hope is we just make a great decision. That's all I care about, is a good decision made, no matter whether you keep the high school, or you tear it down, or whatever you do. I just want it to be a good decision. So that's kind of why I showed up here today, just to listen, because I don't know too much what's been going on. So I hope to learn a little more here today.
Okay, well, let me just take 2 minutes and explain where we are. Over the years, there have been ideas and proposals and presentations on what to do with the school building, and none of them have come to fruition. The latest one is this group called Volunteers of America that approached the town about taking over the building and part of the site and turning it into affordable senior housing. And the task of this committee is to develop a memorandum of understanding, basically a term sheet that we would then, with Volunteers of America, that we would then present to the select board, and then the select board would debate it. It would be a public meeting with public hearing on the memorandum of understanding would turn into an option to purchase agreement, and then that would be ultimately voted on by the selectmen, and then the property would be turned over to the, at some point when they exercise that option, over to Volunteers of America, and they'd start construction on affordable senior housing. That's this current, that is the current task of the committee, and its only task right now. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Like I said,
Okay.
I'm here to try to learn. I'm just trying to understand, because it's become a little bit controversial. I talked to numerous people here in town, and there's certainly different opinions for sure.
Yeah. And you're going to find, unfortunately, we're going to move on to an item on, once the MOU is done, what does this committee do? And then if we have to discuss by law, if we have to discuss any negotiation terms or contract terms with about this arrangement, we have to go into executive session, which means it's closed to the public. Those are just the rules that the state makes us do. Is simply put, when it has to do with town property, contracts that are going to go with town property. So at some point, we'll have to say, we'll have to ask you to excuse yourself so we can go into executive session.
Okay.
Any comments from the committee members?
Just very quickly, on the YouTube chat, I have Ruben Marr. He says that he sees two outcomes with the AD Gray property. One increases taxes, one does not, which is why he is very much in favor of the Volunteers of America proposal. And that was it. And I see Julie's iPhone on there, so I don't know if she's going to be in.
Oh, she's in her car. She's driving back.
Maybe she is. So hi, Julie. Don't worry, we're still in the public session of this, but I think we're still in the citizens' comments, and that's all I have so far.
Okay, so we'll put those citizens.
Volunteers of
I'm
America.
sorry, Bruce. Carl has a question.
Okay,
Volunteers of America now have all their money together to start this project and complete it. And so they got enough financing and fund. I know a little bit about Volunteers of America because I've been involved in some of this type of housing. Do they have all their money together? They got financing, everything's there and in place.
Carl, the best way I can explain that is that they have presented us with, and it was presented in the public's, that they gave a number of public presentations, and I believe some of them you might be able to find on the town's YouTube history. And they laid out funding sources that they would go to, state and federal funding sources they would go to do this project. They can't apply for those, and they can't apply for those until they have what's called right title and interest on the property. And the option to purchase will be that right title and interest. And then they'll go and they'll finalize their finances. Several members of the committee went to visit other similar projects that this specific group of Volunteers of America did in Maine, to see that they have a positive track record. So the feeling of the committee was, yes, they have a credible track record. They've outlined all their possible, all the potential funding sources for this, a pro forma, budget and business plan. But again, they can't apply for those funds. They can't take the loan out. They can't apply for those funds until they have, in legal terms, what's called right title and interest. So they don't have to actually own the property to go and secure those things and get their permits and so on. An option to buy will suffice that. So there's going to be an interim option to purchase agreement, probably 18 months to 2 years, something like that, where they go and they get all this stuff ready, and then they're ready to go, and then they execute that, and then off they go.
Okay, thank you.
Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it did. For
Okay.
now, I may have more later on, but like I said, I'm just trying to learn here what we're doing.
Right. And if you have any questions, you can send an email into Max, and we'll try to get back to you, or we will get back to you. Or if you
Okay,
hear anybody has any questions.
yeah, all right.
Okay.
Thank you. That's good.
Committee members, any committee members have any comments? Okay, so we're done with the committee member and citizen comments and questions. And the next item on the agenda was to discuss what does this subcommittee, the AD Gray Subcommittee, do once we present the MOU, recommended MOU, to the select board. So I'll just open that up for discussion.
Not all at once.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm confused with all the conversation.
And maybe it's Ben.
You and I talked about this a while back, but my sense of it would be that we are in session or active up until the point where the select board approves what we've done. At that point, we become inactive. I would hate to see us disband, but inactive on the chance that maybe something falls apart and we don't have to start all over. But that would be my thought.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think, there's not an answer to this. I certainly don't have an answer, but I think we just want to get, so we could, if for nothing else, make a recommendation to the select board. Here's what we think you should do with hit the pause button or disband it. So,
Right.
Bob?
I like the idea of hitting the pause button. I think it's important to have council around. Let's get the MOU put to bed and see where we go from there.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think Ben has a good point, and if you've agreed with him, Bruce, then that's three of us.
So
Freeman?
Bob, you're saying that the pause means that as the options agreement is negotiated, the committee doesn't have a role?
Oh, I think it could potentially have a role. I'm not saying it doesn't have one. I just think it depends on what points become sticking points on the option agreement. Yeah, I would think that we would want to have the right to come back to the subcommittee and talk about it and see what they think about it. That's my view.
So,
But that isn't very clear to me. Either the committee has a formal role in looking at the option agreement as it's being evolved, and then before it goes before the select board for public discussion, or it doesn't. I don't really understand that.
I think Ben explained it very well when he described what he meant by the pause button.
But he was really talking about after the option agreement was finalized, not the interim. Because what confuses me is it seems to me that with your financial expertise, Bruce's construction expertise, and before that for Saran's real estate expertise, that the committee actually did a good job in terms of creating a really good MOU from where it started with, which I think was really a radically different proposal from VOA. So I thought the committee did a decent job of taking that expertise. And it isn't clear to me that as the option agreement, which is actually much bigger, but still involves all those elements of finance, construction, real estate law, et cetera, and historic building expertise, I'm not sure why that expertise wouldn't be valuable to at least be informed of the option agreement and to have an input. It's certainly not binding input. It's not controlling, but I don't know why that wouldn't be valuable. Especially Bruce. I think that Bruce's input would be valuable all the way up until the option agreement is formalized, because so much is about construction.
Ben?
I'm going to maybe try and do a better job of explaining what I said, because I think Freeman and my sense is we're all on the same page. It's just it's semantics. I didn't intend to suggest that we would be dormant to the point of not being active, but with the select board being the driving, the decision-making body, we're at their disposal, and they could call us back at any time they saw fit. And I just would hate to see us disband and be out of function until the option agreement is signed. But when the MOU goes through and everything's good, we're sort of waiting for any further direction or request for input from. I agree. There's a tremendous amount of expertise here. I'm just a big mouth, but you guys know stuff. So
well, I think that's well said. We certainly the entire process is that direction of the select board. It's entirely within the control, even what we're doing now. Right. So nothing of that changes. The question is whether or not we feel, and recommending the select board, that we still feel that there's a value, for example, in you or Bruce or others giving advice as the process unfolds, whether or not really, to be honest, whether or not Bruce and others really aren't involved in the process, except really as a formality, which is very different. Either there's a sort of active enrollment, but of course it's always advisory. Jan and Abden and Bob and the Colonel and Katie obviously are totally in the driver's seat at all times. And we have no statutory or otherwise authority. We're just advisors.
Right.
But I don't know anybody on the select board that has Bruce's construction expertise. And I should explain that the option and purchase agreement is a very detailed document that goes into a lot of things that we've hardly discussed yet, including, for example, in the MOU, for example, there's nothing about actually the real layout of the project, how many square feet, there's actually a reasonable amount of performance information because it's both an option and a purchase agreement. So the town wants to make sure that actually they build what they say. Now they say 32 units. Now I know they mean it, but there's a little more flesh on the bones that would go into this agreement. Just like if you had an option to build a home with a builder, you wouldn't just say, well, I want a 5,000 square foot home. You'd want to say how many bathrooms, kitchen, you want a certain meat in the bones. Well, I think in that case, especially on this purchase agreement, is that Bruce is the one who knows the meat and the bones, so that actually the town gets what the town thinks it negotiated for, but it only can get what actually, in terms of construction, which is in the document. Now, we're not talking about, dotting every T, but there are ways to handle this and even use other projects they've done so that there's some expectation that the select board has as to what gets done. And again, I think Bruce is the person who knows this better than any of us.
So I was thinking that that what we were going to hand over again to the select board was a fully negotiated, the terms, that we've outlined, the fully negotiated terms, the kind of the cogent parts, the meat of it. And then the balance was more the boilerplate legalese that has to go with a real estate transaction. I forgot about that we're not, the blanket would be this, MOU rolls into a purchase option agreement for the land to be built with the following plans and specifications. And, we don't have any plans and specifications yet. We had their concept drawing. So I didn't even think of that part. So, okay, that gives us something to think about. Okay.
Well, my view is that this committee is not negotiating the agreement. This committee is an advising committee. I would not want to walk into a room without knowing that we have recourse to you guys. That's important. And I think from where I'm sitting, that says all we need to say.
Yeah.
Julie's going to be the head of the spear on this. It's her job. That's what she does.
We totally agree with that. We're not negotiating the MOU, and
No.
we're going to negotiate the option. But there's a difference between negotiating and actually advising substantively of what might go into the option agreement. So in the same way that we've informed the MOU without negotiating it, because I've never spoken to VOA as a negotiator, nor I don't believe as Bruce, we're saying that we think the same sort of advisory function might be interesting again, but we're not negotiating with VOA on either of these.
There's a fine
I have
line.
no intention.
Yeah, but there's a fine line that's been drawn here. And I think it's up to the discretion of Julie and the select board to decide where that line is to be drawn.
Oh,
And
we totally agree. But we're
Thinking-
suggesting where we're going.
If it doesn't go right, you're gonna want me to blame.
We don't want anybody to blame. We want it. That to me
Yeah.
is not, that's a horrible thing to say because we don't want anything to go wrong.
I
We
don't
want
want
this to
anything
be-
to go wrong either.
We want this to be perfect, and we want to be able that if there are issues that might be possible problems, to advise on them so that they'll become problems. We want this to be perfect. Without any problems, we want it in every respect to go flawlessly, without any problems, all the way through the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years.
I would too, but I've sat for 35 years in municipal government, and I'm paid to take the hits, so it's okay.
Well, but I mean, when we get what we're going back and forth with now on VOA through Julie, isn't that part of the negotiation? They're agreeing to the 3 or 4 major principles that we said we wanted to have. And so my thought was those aren't going to change when it goes up to the select board. What do you guys
But
smile
you're
at?
saying whatever you send up to the select board as an advisory committee, you think that won't change?
That was, I thought, yeah, I mean, the key points there.
Well, I think that your advisory, in the end, the select board is the one who has to vote on it. I mean,
But I mean, if I'm confused then, because if VOA and this committee came to agreement on the 4 or 5 key points or whatever they were, 3 or 4 key points that we've been discussing, why would VOA want to change that?
I don't think they would. But what I'm saying is, say, I just want to make it clear, the committees, subcommittees of the select board, they're the ones that you can recommend, but in the end, it's select board that approves.
Okay, yeah, understood. Yeah,
That's my only point.
We totally agree that the advisory committee
Right.
has no statutory authority under municipal or Maine law. We agree, has no authority whatsoever, period. Anything that we say can be ignored totally, of course.
Right. I just don't want to set it, I wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. And it's not just for this subcommittee, but for any subcommittee.
yeah. Well, I'd be disappointed if after all this work that, those 4 or 5 key principles that we agreed on, both the principle and the amounts we talked about, if they change substantially, that would be disappointing.
Well, it might be disappointing, but I will give you an alternative view that I've gotten over the last couple of weeks, because this has been so much in the newspaper, is many people feel they voted the select board in, and it's the select board. And so, there's some opposing views out there that in the end, is it the AD Gray Committee making the decisions, or is it the select board making decisions? And I've gotten that question a lot. And there are people out there who said, that should have been handled by the select board. They're the elected officials. And I'm like, well, but bear in mind, I got a little defensive and said, bear in mind, they're taking advice and advisory in an advisory capacity from members of the public that have expertise in this area. So we've gotten a little bit beat up, I'll let you know, about where the elected official versus an advisory committee comes in. So I'm just giving you both sides of that coin, Bruce, that's all.
Could I ask
Okay.
a question, Julie? Since no one in the advisory committee that I know of has spoken publicly about this or their role, I certainly haven't spoken to anybody about it because it's confidential. Where would this be coming from that people would even
I think it's coming from the former chairperson, then becoming very publicly
Partisan.
But that has nothing to do with us. She's left the committee.
But she was on the, unfortunately, how it played out to many members of the public. Part of the issue becomes, and part of the criticism is that I think that's what brought attention to it, was here was the chairperson of the AD Gray Committee, and now there's this competing, again, even though she stepped down, that's where I think some of this criticism that I've been hearing has come from.
Well, I would
I'm
just
making you guys aware.
I think it would just simply say that it's almost a misunderstanding of Maine law, municipal law, that except for something like a budget committee or planning board, which are part of Maine law, this committee has no authority to do anything in anything. And furthermore, even to be honest, even if you were to negotiate a point of yourself that had nothing to do with the committee and you brought it to the select board, even if VOA agreed with the point that you agreed to, the select board certainly has it in their authority
They do.
to disagree with your negotiation and say, I'm sorry, Julie, go back to VO and told them that we can't live with what you negotiated, because ultimately you, under Maine law, don't represent the town. Only 5 people on that committee have the right to do this transaction, period. No one
Right,
else.
and I have made that clear. I'm just saying, I'm just giving you some insight into what my office has been dealing with. As far as-
But those misapprehensions of Maine law, even though I understand where they're coming from, simply don't bear upon whatever the process is that the select board determines for this committee. It needs to be determined on what's best for the town, because it's a misapprehension of the role of the committee vis-a-vis select board or even yourself, because really there are 3 different roles.
There are, but I just want to give you some background of why I think that's come up and why it's a question. That's all.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to suggest we move on to discussion unless there's other people. I think we've aired this out enough, unless Bruce, you disagree.
No, I think we're all set. So do we have any other business before we go into executive session?
The only thing on the agenda would be just subcommittee member comments where you could just bring things up at this time that doesn't relate to the agenda.
Any subcommittee members have any comments?
No,
None, then-
just one, Bruce, and that is I have an appointment at 4 that I have to,
Okay.
so I'm setting my parameter here.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. So can I have a motion to move into executive session?
Moved.
Second.
All
Pursuant
those-
to 405-6, I think it's C, to discuss a contractual issue.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, Mac, take us into warp drive.
Work drive, make it so.